Her alpha rejected her for her own sister, so she accepted a stranger's proposal and left the pack forever. Nadia had been waking up at 5 in the morning for 3 years, not because anyone asked her to, not because it appeared anywhere in the pack's rules or expectations, or the long unwritten list of things a person in her position was supposed to do. She just did it, rolled off her narrow cot in the dark before any light had found the gap in the curtains, sat up and laced her boots by feel, and walked the eastern boundary of the territory while the rest of the pack was still wrapped in whatever sleep people got when they were not spending their nights listening to their own thoughts. The eastern boundary was not exciting territory. It was a long stretch of fenced hillside with a water line running under it, 2 stands of pine on the far ridge, and a gate at the southern end that nobody used because it was too far from the main road to be practical. Nadia had walked it 360-odd times over 3 years. She knew every fence post. She knew the one that leaned slightly inward from where a deer had hit it one winter. She knew the spot where the ground dipped near the second water junction, where the soil stayed wet longer than the rest, and she had flagged it on the maintenance log twice, and neither flag had been actioned. She told herself she walked it for the exercise, for the fresh air, for the habit of it, the way certain habits become their own reason over time. She knew if she sat with the real answer at 5 in the morning, in the dark, before she was awake enough to manage her own honesty, that she walked it because of Caleb. He trained at dawn. He had done it every morning of the 2 years he had been alpha, and probably before that too, long before the title came to him. It was not a performance, she was certain of that, had been certain almost from the first time she had quietly observed it. Nobody trains like that for an audience. It was the kind of discipline that lives in a person and has to go somewhere each day, like a fire that needs somewhere to burn. He ran the western tree line. He did his sets in the training yard dirt. He finished and stood with his hands on his knees for exactly the amount of time he needed and not a second more, and then he went inside. Nadia didn't train with him. She was not deluded enough to call what she did following him. She simply had reasons to be nearby. The boundary markers needed checking, the perimeter logs needed signing off on, and someone had to do those things at some point, and she happened to do them at 5 in the morning. She happened to leave 2 thermoses at the edge of the training yard before he arrived. One plain water, one with the electrolyte powder, because she had observed in the second month of watching, not watching, of being nearby, that he got bad headaches on training mornings, and she had thought about it and figured out why, and had begun quietly correcting for it, without ever mentioning that she had noticed. She put the thermoses down and she walked away. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. She didn't want it, she told herself, and she almost believed that. That is the kind of person Nadia was. The kind who gives quietly and then steps back before the giving can be seen, as if being caught in the act of caring would be a kind of embarrassment. She would not understand, until later, that stepping back before the caring can be seen is also how you make yourself invisible to the person you most want to be seen by. She was 23 years old, the third daughter of Mara and her father, who was posted in the north and who had always been, in the gentle and complete way of some fathers, slightly more comfortable with the world outside his family than inside it. Her oldest sister Priya had the looks. Not in a mean way. Nadia did not think of it meanly. Priya was simply the kind of person who was visually arresting, who made strangers do small recalibrations when she entered a room. It was just a fact, like a fact about weather. Her middle sister Lena had the warmth. This was more complicated, because warmth can be performed, and Lena's was not performed. It was genuine, and instinctive, and unstrategic, and it drew people to her the way real warmth always does, because people are cold a lot of the time, and they can tell the difference between a real fire and a painted one. Nadia had the competence. She had understood early on that this was a valuable thing. She had understood also early on that value and desire are different currencies. You could need something without wanting it. You could appreciate something without choosing it. She had organized the pack's entire medical supply system at 16. The healer, old Daya, had been losing her eyesight gradually over the span of a decade, and the inventory system she had used for 40 years was now being maintained by a woman who could no longer read the labels on half the jars. Nadia had walked into the healer's station one afternoon and seen Dia squinting at a small brown jar with an expression of careful concentration that she recognized, with a specific horror, as the expression of someone who was guessing. She had rebuilt the whole system over the following 6 weeks. New labels with text large enough to read from arm's length, a color-coded shelf arrangement, a tactile index, different textures on the jar lids, different shapes, for the items Dia needed most. She had done all of this during the same weeks she was studying for her end-of-year exams and taking over the household cooking while her mother managed her father's long-distance paperwork during his posting. She had not mentioned it to anyone. Dia had cried a little, quietly, and had pressed Nadia's hands between both of hers and said, "Steady hands, girl. Those will serve you." Nadia had said, "I know," and had gone home and started on the exam revision. She had been finding ways to make enough and to not need anything loud in return, for a very long time. Caleb had been alpha for 2 years when the story began. He was 26 when his father stepped down. A bad knee and the specific exhaustion of a man who has been holding something heavy for a long time and has decided he can put it down. There had been people who were uncertain about Caleb. Not many, and not loudly, but they existed in the council and in the cautious corners of the quarterly meetings. He was young. He was direct in a way that the older members found occasionally startling. He had a habit of making decisions quickly and then working backward to explain them, which was not the process the council preferred even when the decisions were right. He was right often enough that the uncertainty faded, not because he was flawless. He forgot to file the biannual boundary reports and had to be reminded twice. He was too blunt with Councilman Rao at the summer meeting and had to go back and smooth it over, which he did with less grace than he could have managed. He trusted his instincts over the data in front of him on at least 3 occasions, and all 3 times the instincts turned out to be correct, which was both reassuring and slightly maddening depending on who you asked. He was good. Not perfect. Good. There is a difference, and Nadia understood it, and she thought the difference was what made him worth watching. She knew that he drank his coffee without sugar. She knew that he had mismatched plates. She had counted them once, involuntarily, standing in his kitchen doorway for 45 seconds while he signed a supply delivery form. A blue one, a white one with a chip on the rim, 2 plain brown ones, one with small painted flowers, that had clearly arrived there by some domestic accident and never been replaced, because replacing it would require a kind of domestic attention he did not prioritize. She knew that he ran his hand through his hair from the back forward when he was reading something frustrating, and that he apologized by doing the thing he was apologizing for differently the next time, and that he always showed up on time for things that mattered to him even when he was late to things that didn't. She had been cataloging him for 3 years. She had never told him any of it. The quarterly pack gathering was the main social event of the season. Every family in the territory, long tables of food, the children running the gaps between adults, the elders arranged in their corner with their drinks and their opinions. Nadia had set up the healer's table on the east wall, Dia's supplies organized exactly right, the wellness check sign-in sheet on a clipboard, the small basket of ginger chews that everyone pretended not to take, but that vanished completely by the end of every gathering. She was organizing the sign-in sheet when Lena came in. The sign-in sheet did not need organizing. She had organized it already. She was reorganizing it because she needed something to do with her hands, and because the act of looking down at a clipboard was a useful alternative to looking across the room. Lena walked into gatherings with an unconscious ease that Nadia had been studying her whole life without ever being able to replicate. It was not beauty, exactly, or not only beauty. It was something about how Lena moved through space, as if the space wanted her in it. People turned without deciding to. Conversations paused and then resumed with a different quality. Even the children slowed down when Lena came through, which was remarkable, because children very rarely slowed down for anything. Nadia watched from behind the clipboard. She watched Lena cross the room. She watched her laugh at something Tage said. Real laughter, the full face kind, because Lena's warmth was not strategic, and it showed in the specifics. She watched the room settle around Lena like water settling. Then she watched Caleb's head turn. He had been in the middle of a sentence with Roshan. Roshan, to his credit, waited patiently for the sentence to continue. It did not continue. Nadia looked at the sign-in sheet. She straightened it. She straightened it again. She moved the pen to align exactly with the edge of the clipboard. She moved the ginger chew basket 2 inches to the right, then 2 inches back. She was thorough and meticulous, and she did not look up. Later, Lena found her at the table and sat on the edge of it and said she looked tired. Nadia said she was fine. Lena told her she had been adjusting that clipboard for 20 minutes. Nadia said she had a perimeter check to do. Lena's face did the thing with the staircase, the look of someone standing at a height they did not choose. She said, "He asked me to dance." Nadia kept her face neutral. She had been practicing neutral for years. "He's good for the pack," Nadia said. "Go back. You're being looked for." She felt Lena watching her for a long time before the sound of her footsteps moved away. She did not look up from the basket. 3 weeks passed with the particular slowness of things that are falling apart in small, deniable increments. Caleb canceled the Thursday supply review. He sent Roshan. Roshan was professional and thorough, and Nadia gave him everything he needed, and the whole meeting was conducted with perfect efficiency and felt, in some way she did not try to name, like eating a meal that had no taste. Caleb forgot she had flagged the eastern water line. He raised it at the next council meeting as if it were new information. Tej said Nadia brought this up weeks ago. Caleb said good, make a note of it. He did not look toward where she was sitting. She moved her alarm from 5 to 5:30. Just 15 minutes. Just enough that she would not be on the eastern boundary when he was running the tree line. She slept badly. She told herself she was sleeping better. Her mother made rice pudding on Sunday, the cardamom kind, the specific recipe that meant something was being thought over. Lena came by yesterday, Mara said, stirring the pot. She texted me too. She seems well. Nadia took 2 bowls from the cabinet, put 2 spoons beside them, waited, because her mother's way was to come at things sideways and arrive eventually, and rushing the process had never worked. "She worries about you," Mara said. "She doesn't need to." "I know." Mara stirred in a slow circle, then a figure 8. "Your grandmother had a saying about this sort of thing. She said a woman who plants her garden in borrowed soil should not be surprised when the harvest belongs to someone else." Nadia set down the spoons. "That's a long road to a short destination, Ma. Eat your pudding." She ate. It was sweet and warm, and it tasted of cardamom and of something else she could not put a name to. Lena came over on a Tuesday night. No food, no excuse, no cheerful thing to fill the entrance. She sat on the end of the bed in the old way, the way she had done during childhood thunderstorms, when fear needed company but could not be admitted directly. Nadia was at her desk. She stayed at her desk. "I didn't ask for any of this," Lena said. The words were small, and they sat in the room the way small words with big meaning do, taking up more space than their size suggested. Nadia turned her pen over. The cap was cracked on one side. She had been meaning to throw it away. She looked at the crack. She turned it over again. "I know that," she said. "I want you to be angry at me. I want you to say something real." "I'm not angry at you, Lena." "Then what?" Nadia put the pen down. She turned in her chair and looked at her sister, the genuine warmth, and the genuine worry, and the genuine beauty of her, all real, none of it a choice, none of it a fault. "I'm angry at myself," she said, "for being the person who is useful to everyone and chosen by no one. That's the thing I need to sort out. Not you, not him, that specific thing." She said it the way you say something that has been sitting in you long enough to come out without decoration or apology. Lena's eyes went wet. She said it was the saddest thing she had ever heard. Nadia said maybe. She said go home and sleep. After Lena left, Nadia sat at the desk for a long time. Then she picked up the cracked pen and threw it in the bin. She had been meaning to do that for a week. It happened in the hall. That was the detail her mind returned to, in the days after, more than any other. Not the words he used, not his face, not the witnesses or the way Roshan studied the floor with such care. The hall, the main hall, the same hall, the east wall with the healer's table and the ginger chew basket and the sign-in sheet she had straightened too many times. He stood at the front. She stood in the middle of the room. He used the pack's formal language, the specific, old-fashioned phrases that existed precisely for this, the ending of an understood arrangement, the formal closing of a door. There was a ritual quality to it, which she supposed was merciful. It gave you somewhere to put your face. He said Lena's name. He said it without unkindness. That was the detail with the most weight in it, somehow. Not cruelty, not shame, just the calm certainty of a person who had decided something and was now stating it. Nadia looked at her hands. They were still. They had always been still when she needed them to be. She thought about the eastern water line, whether the rust had spread to the second junction, whether she had logged it properly the last time she went. She thought about whether she had left the healer's cabinet unlocked this morning. When he finished, she said, "All right." She walked out. Her boots on the floor, solid, measured, unhurried, made their sound, and she listened to them because they were something to hold on to. Outside, cold air, a dog barking somewhere in the territory, repetitive and earnest and loyal to its own noise. She stood there until her hands went cold. Then she walked home, and she did not look at the window on the second floor of the main house, with the light that sometimes stayed on until midnight. He arrived the next morning, an unfamiliar vehicle through the main gate, just past 8. Old territory business, boundary documents, the kind of inter-pack administrative visit that happened every year or two, and required someone to come sit at a table and agree to things that had already been agreed to in principle. Nadia was in the supply yard. She had not slept. She had decided sometime before dawn to simply stop caring about looking like someone who had slept, because caring about that would require energy she did not have. She heard boots on gravel heading toward her rather than toward the main house. She looked up. He was tall, not aggressively tall, just factually. He had a plain dark jacket and the kind of face that had taken some weather over the years, without developing a resentment about it. He stopped at the edge of the supply yard and looked at the crates, then at her clipboard. "Supply yard," he said. "Yes, looking for the main house. Past the water tanks, left at the training yard." He didn't go immediately. He looked at the inventory sheet. "You're counting by hand. The system hasn't been accurate in 3 months. Hand count is more reliable." He said, just that, as if the answer had landed where it needed to. "Eastern boundary looks clean coming in," he added. "I walked it last week. Good work." Then he went. She listened to his boots on the gravel until the sound disappeared. She stood still for a moment. Then she went back to counting. Tage came to the supply yard at 4:30 that afternoon. He stood at the edge of it with his hands in his jacket pockets, which was his posture for complicated things. "The man who came this morning," he said. "I know who you mean. He put something to the council." A pause. The light at 4:30 came through the yard at that low, specific angle that made the dust visible in the air. "A formal mating proposal. For you." Nadia set her clipboard down. She picked it up, set it down again. "He doesn't know me," she said. "He said the same thing. He said, I wrote this down because he said it plainly. I don't know her, but I've been watching her work since this morning, and she is exactly the kind of person my pack needs. He addressed the proposal to you directly, not to the Alpha, not to your family, to you." That last sentence landed somewhere specific. Not dramatically, quietly, the way a key lands in a lock. "To me," she said. "To you." She looked at the supply crates, at the log in front of her, at the notation in the margin from 3 weeks ago. "Eastern water line, rust at second junction, needs attention before spring," in her own handwriting. "I'll think about it," she said. "What's his pack like?" she added, before Tej could turn to go. He considered the question in the deliberate way he considered things. "Organized," he said, "the kind that stays organized." He left. The yard was quiet. The dust settled. She stood there for a long time. She did not sleep that night. At midnight she got up and laced her boots and walked the pack house in the dark. Not patrolling, just moving, because her head was too full and motion was the only prescription for it that had ever worked. The healer's station first. Dark inside, shelves and jars and the smell of the remedies. She let her hands find their way. The linens, the bandage rolls, the jars she had labeled at 16, the system she had rebuilt every time she found a way to improve it. She knew every inch of this room. She had made it useful. It would stay useful after her. She thought, I am very good at making things function that do not need me to function. The training yard. Cold out there, the night air off the hills. The boot marks in the dirt from the morning session. She sat on the fence rail. She sat there for a long time without doing anything else. She was not thinking about Caleb specifically. She was thinking about the version of herself that stayed. She could see her very clearly, not dramatically, just in the plain way of someone imagining a route they have driven before. The version of Nadia who stayed would still get up at 5, would still count the inventory and maintain the healer's logs and flag the water line, would still be fine, would still be useful, would call it enough and mean it, more or less, and that more or less would grow over time, the gap between enough and what she actually wanted, growing slowly wider until she stopped being able to see across it. The word fine sat in her chest like a stone she had been carrying for so long she had stopped noticing the weight. She felt it now. She sat on the fence rail in the cold, and she felt how heavy it was. She had been calling things fine for years. Lena found her on the back porch at 2 in the morning, sitting with a cup of tea that had gone cold. I heard about the proposal, Lena said. Ma, obviously. They sat for a while without talking. The night air moved through the yard. Do you know what the worst part is? Nadia said. Not a question. Lena waited. She had always been good at waiting for the real sentence. I was never angry at you. I tried. I thought anger would be useful, would give me something to do with all of it. But I couldn't get angry at you. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just yourself, and that was enough, and I wasn't. Nadia. I'm angry at myself for being the kind of person who is useful to everyone around them and chosen by no one. She said it plainly, no drama in it. That's the thing I actually have to solve. Not you, not him, not any of it. That specific thing. Lena was quiet for a long time. Will you go? She said. Nadia looked at the hills, the territory she had been walking since she was 16, the eastern line with its rusted pipe at the second junction and the wet patch in the ground and the fence post that leaned from where the deer had hit it. I don't know yet, she said. She did know. She had known since 4:30, in the supply yard, when Tej said addressed to you, directly, to you. She had spent 3 years not being the person things were addressed to directly. She thought, maybe it is time to be somewhere that I am. She wrote the letter at 5 in the morning. Habit. Some habits don't care about circumstances. 3 sentences. She was not a dramatic person, and she was not going to practice drama at the end. She accepted the proposal. She stated her terms. She signed her name. No preamble. No apology in it anywhere. She read it over once. It said what she meant. She had never written anything that clean in her life. She had always added qualifiers before. Softened the ask. Apologized for the space she was taking before she took it. Made the asking smaller than the actual ask. This letter had none of that. It was just the thing itself, stated plainly. She folded it and delivered it to Tej's door before 6. The bag was faded green canvas, 6 years old, one broken zipper pull replaced with a metal ring she had taken from the hardware shelf. She knew this bag well. It had been to Interpac medical trainings, to the regional council summit, to a family visit she had cut short when she discovered her capacity for extended family time was 8 days shorter than she had estimated. Healer's kit first, always first. Then the 4 logbooks, her system, her shorthand, the notation she had developed that only Dia had bothered to learn. She took every one, they were hers. Warmest sweater, 2 thermal shirts, the boots she was already wearing. She stood in front of the shelf with the impractical things. The small framed photograph of her grandmother, a woman who had walked her own boundaries in her own way and had said things that Nadia had been discovering were true for her whole life. The stone from the eastern line, smooth and dark, picked up on the first morning she had walked it at 16, for no reason she could name, and kept for no reason she had ever needed to name. She took both of those. She left the tin box from Lena with the 2 caramel candies from 3 Eids ago. She had never eaten them because she liked knowing they were there. She left them so something sweet would remain in that spot after her. She left the leather cord Caleb had given her at the end of her first year with Dia. He had given it without ceremony because acknowledging work was something he did, something she had noticed and filed. She had kept it on that shelf like it was evidence of something. It had been evidence of something. It was not enough evidence. She left it. She zipped the bag. The metal ring worked better than the original pull. She stood up. She did not take a last look around the room. She was not built for last looks. She had always moved forward, not back. The room was in her already. It would come with her. She went. The morning light was thin and uncertain, the sky still deciding what it wanted to be. She crossed the yard. Healer's station on the left, supply yard ahead, training ground to the right with its scuffed earth, and the fence rail she had sat on at midnight. She passed all of it. She did not slow down. She passed the main house. She did not look at the second-floor window. She had looked at that window more times than she would ever count, in 3 years of 5-in-the-morning walks, and she was not going to count them now at the end of it. She kept walking. Roshan was at the south gate for the Wednesday delivery. He looked at her bag. He looked at her face. He was a person who read situations accurately and did not add anything unnecessary to them. "Safe travels," he said. "Thank you, Roshan." She meant it, fully. He opened the gate. She walked through it. Silas was at the territorial line. She had not been sure whether he would come himself. He was there, leaning against his vehicle in the same jacket as yesterday, with the posture of a person who had been waiting a while and had found nothing to complain about in the waiting. He looked at her bag, looked at her face. A quick, accurate read that did not announce itself. "Did you eat this morning?" he said. Not "how are you?" Not "are you sure about this?" Not any of the things a person might say at a moment like this, if they were trying to fill the moment with care that was really about their own discomfort. "Did you eat?" "No," she said. He reached into the vehicle and held out a paper bag. "Flatbread, warm, wrapped in cloth. 2 pieces. Long drive," he said. "Thank you." She ate standing at the line. Caraway and salt, the warmth of something that had been wrapped carefully. She ate all of it. He ate the other piece. He did not fill the silence with anything that didn't need to be there. He seemed to understand, without discussion, that the silence right now had weight and deserved its space. She filed that. She was a person who filed things. When she finished, she brushed the crumbs from her jacket, and she stood at the line for a moment. She looked back at the territory, the hills she knew, the tree line, the supply yard somewhere in there with its crates in their rows, the healer's station, the hall, the eastern boundary with its rusted pipe at the second junction. She looked for a moment. Then she looked at the road ahead, and the different hills beyond the line, and the bigger sky. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said. She stepped across the line. 4 hours. He drove. She sat with her bag between her feet and her healer's log on her lap, not reading it, just holding the weight of it, which was familiar and steadying in the way that familiar things are when everything else is in motion. They didn't talk much in the first hour. 2 practical people who understood that not everything needed to be filled. He put music on at the second hour. Something instrumental, nothing demanding. "How long has your pack held the territory?" she asked, when it felt like asking. 4 generations in my family. Pack formally settled it 80 years ago. What does the eastern boundary look like? He glanced at her. She was looking at the road ahead. Long hill stretch, good visibility from the ridge. Water systems older. There are some fittings at the northern junction that need attention. Corrosion on the connector joints. Inside the joint or outside? Inside mostly. That's usually the sealant degrading before the pipe itself goes. It's a straightforward fix if you catch it before the cold sets in hard. That's what I figured. I've needed someone to actually go out there and evaluate it properly rather than just note it on a list. She wrote something in the margin of her log. He didn't ask what she was writing. She liked that. She noted that she liked it. "I'm good with pipe fittings," she said, "mostly to the window." "I had a feeling," he said. And that was the end of it. Settled. No more needed. She fell asleep at the 3rd hour. Her body simply made the decision. Too little sleep, too many weeks of holding herself carefully together, too much running on the specific energy of a person who is managing very hard and has gotten good at not showing it. Her body remembered that sleep existed and reclaimed it without asking. She woke as the territory changed, lower hills, wider sky, the light coming at a different angle. She sat up without apologizing for the sleep, because apologizing for sleeping in a car was the kind of unnecessary social ceremony she was going to leave behind with the tin box and the leather cord. A travel blanket had been put over her. She folded it neatly and set it in the back seat without commenting on it. 20 minutes, he said. All right. She watched the new territory through the window. Different fence markings, signs in a slightly different style. Trees that were the same species but planted differently, arranged by different hands. Everything recognizable in category and unfamiliar in specifics. She thought, this is a place I do not know yet. She thought, I have learned places before. This is something I am good at. She rolled the window down an inch. The air came in cold and carried a smell she couldn't name. Grass and soil and rock and something underneath it. Something particular to this specific piece of ground. She would learn it. She would walk this boundary at dawn and learn what it smelled like in every season. She put her hand out the window and held it in the moving air. Her hands were steady. They had always been steady. They were still hers. The pack came to the gate. 12 people, give or take, different ages, standing with the deliberate ease of people who have decided not to look like they were waiting. Nadia got out of the vehicle and stood with her bag and looked at them, and they looked at her. A woman about her own age, arms folded, not hostile, evaluating, a professional reading a situation, an older man, silver-haired, with questions in his eyes that he was saving for later. 3 children with the unself-conscious honesty of children, staring fully and without any strategy about it. Nadia had spent her entire life in rooms that did not rearrange themselves for her. This one was not rearranging either. Nobody stepped forward with open arms. Nobody made a speech. They were simply there, taking her measure, waiting to see. Good. She did not want a performance of welcome. She wanted a place where her work would land where it was aimed. This is Nadia, Silas said. Medical station, boundary logs, supply coordination. He said it the way she had written the letter. Just the things that were true, stated plainly. She knows what she's doing. The woman with the folded arms unfolded one of them and gave a small nod. It said, all right, we'll see. Nadia nodded back. She could work with we'll see. She had always been able to work with we'll see. It was the most honest starting point available. Vikram, the silver-haired man, showed her the medical station. She followed him across the yard. The gate shut behind her. New territory, new ground, same boots. Her first week at the new territory had a specific texture she would remember for a long time afterward. Not difficult, exactly. Difficult would have implied resistance, and what she encountered was not resistance so much as the careful neutrality of people deciding what to make of her. The medical station needed work, not in a crisis way. Nothing was in immediate failure, but it had the look of a space that had been maintained at the minimum required, and no more. A space where the threshold was, nothing is visibly wrong. Nadia's threshold was, everything works as well as it can. These were different thresholds, and she spent the first 3 days closing the gap between them. She reorganized the shelving, not dramatically, just efficiently, moving the items she would need most often to the positions most accessible without bending, grouping the supply categories by frequency of use rather than by size of container. She rebuilt the inventory system in her log and left the old one intact as a backup, which was a courtesy she had learned to offer in unfamiliar spaces. Don't announce you're improving things. Just improve them and let the improvement speak. The woman with the folded arms was named Devika. She ran the pack's boundary patrol schedule and had been the de facto medical liaison since the position had been empty for 7 months. She came by the station on the second afternoon, ostensibly to return some equipment that had been borrowed for a patrol kit. She stood in the doorway and looked at the reorganized shelves. She didn't say anything for a moment. The bandage rolls used to be on the bottom shelf, she said. They're in the middle now. at arm reach. If you're treating someone and you need a bandage roll, you've usually already used both hands on the injury and you need to access the shelf without bending. Nadia looked up from the log she was rewriting. I can put them back if there's a reason they were on the bottom. Devika looked at the middle shelf. She looked at Nadia. No, she said. Middle makes sense. She left. But she came back the next day, and the day after, and by the end of the first week she was stopping by most mornings on her way to the patrol schedule meeting, and the stops had begun to include coffee and conversation rather than just equipment returns. Nadia filed this. She was making a map of the new territory, and not all the landmarks were geographical. Vikram, the silver-haired man who had shown her the medical station on the first day, was the pack's senior record keeper and the person who had maintained the boundary logs, or tried to, during the gap period. He had done it conscientiously, but without the specific interest in the logs that the logs required. Gaps accumulated. Cross-references were missed. The Eastern Waterline situation was not unique. It was representative. He handed the logs over to her on the third day with the look of a man handing back a project he has done his best with and knows his best was not quite right. I kept up with it as much as I could, he said. You kept it running, she said. That's what it needed. He nodded, and she could see that this was the right thing to have said, not flattery, just accurate. He had kept it running. That was real and worth acknowledging. She would build on what he had kept running. She spent the fourth and fifth days going through the logs from the past 7 months and building a complete picture of what had been maintained, what had been deferred, and what had been missed entirely. She made a list. The list was longer than she had hoped and shorter than she had feared, which seemed like a reasonable outcome. She brought it to Silas on day 6. He read it. He read it properly, not skimming. She had worked with people who skimmed, and she could always tell, and he wasn't skimming. The pipe fitting is the most urgent, he said, when he reached the bottom of the list. Yes. The others can wait for spring except the third item. The southern gate hinge is a safety issue that should be addressed before the winter patrol season. Agreed. He looked up. Can you handle the gate yourself, or do you need Vikram's help? She had looked at the gate that morning, in the specific way of a person assessing a task. I can handle it. All right? Anything else? She almost said, no, that's all. She almost made the ask smaller than the actual ask, the way she had always done. The supply order, she said instead. The connector size has been wrong for 3 years. I've already sourced the right one from a supplier, 2 territories over. I'd like to place the order. Do it. Just that. No committee. No approval process. No, let me check with the council. Let me think about it. Let me get back to you. Just do it. She stood there for a moment with the straightforwardness of it. I'll have the order in by end of day, she said. Good. He was already looking back at the list, making his own notes in the margin. She went and placed the order. She thought about that exchange for the rest of the day, in the background of the other tasks, the specificity of it, the way the path between identifying a problem and being authorized to solve it had been so short. She had spent 3 years at the old pack in a space where that path ran through multiple checkpoints and required multiple acknowledgments and often looped back on itself and arrived eventually at, good point, we'll put it on the agenda. This had taken less than 4 minutes. She was not sure, yet, what to do with the extra energy that getting out of her own way had returned to her. She thought she would probably figure it out. Devika knocked on the station door on the evening of day 10 and held up 2 cups of tea. Do you drink tea? She said. Yes. I wasn't sure. Some people only do coffee. I do both. Tea in the evening. Devika came in and sat on the bench along the east wall, and Nadia sat on the stool at her workstation, and they drank their tea. You reorganized the supply shed too, Devika said. It was not quite a statement and not quite a question. 3 days ago, I left a copy of the new layout on the door. I saw. A pause. It's better. Nadia waited to see if that was all. I want to say something, Devika said, and I want you to take it the right way. All right. When Silas said he was bringing someone in, I was ready not to like it. We'd been managing. The station was functional. I thought, We don't need someone coming in and telling us what we've been doing wrong for 7 months. That's a reasonable thing to think, Nadia said. It is. Except you didn't do that. You just— Devika looked at her tea. You just started doing the things that needed doing, without making a thing of it. Nadia said, the things needed doing. I know. I'm saying I noticed the way you did it. They sat with that for a moment. I had practice, Nadia said, after a while. Being somewhere that things needed doing. Devika looked at her. There was a question in the look that she didn't ask, and Nadia didn't offer anything more, and neither of them needed to. Same time tomorrow? Devika said, when the tea was done. Yes, said Nadia. She had been making the map of the new territory for 10 days now. The geographical parts she was getting down quickly, the boundary, the slopes, the gate angles, the waterline routes. The human parts were slower, which was how human parts always were, but they were coming. Devika, Vikram, the 3 children who had discovered that the medical station had a small supply of the ginger chews that their parents said were only for when you were sick, but that Nadia quietly restocked and quietly made available. Silas, she was still mapping. He was not a complicated person. She did not get the sense of layers being hidden. He was simply a person who did not offer more than was needed and expected the same from others, which was actually, she was finding, a very comfortable way to operate. You knew where you stood. The things he said were the things he meant. She found this remarkable. She had not quite understood, until she had a contrast for it, how much energy she had been spending in her previous life parsing what people meant versus what they said. The gap between those two things had required constant maintenance. She had been maintaining it for years without realizing it was taking anything out of her. Here the gap was small. The things people said were mostly the things they meant. She was getting back the energy she had spent on parsing. She was finding, to her own mild surprise, that she had quite a lot of it. She wrote to Lena on day 14. Not a long letter. She was not a long letter writer. 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph described the territory, the hill, the wide sky, the bird on the ridge with its 3-note call, the particular quality of the morning air that she had not yet found the right words for. The second paragraph said, I think I made the right decision. I wanted you to know that. She sealed it and sent it with the outgoing mail packet. Lena wrote back in 4 days. Her letter was much longer, 3 full pages in Lena's sprawling handwriting that always angled slightly to the right as if the words were leaning toward something. She said she was glad. She said she had been worried and was now, reading the letter, less worried. She said Ma had made rice pudding again and had not explained why. She said Priya was visiting from her posting and that they had had dinner together and nobody had talked about the obvious thing and it had been both awkward and somehow okay. She said, I love you. Come back and visit someday when it feels right. Not before. Nadia read the letter twice. Then she folded it and put it in the back of her logbook, where she kept the things she wanted to keep close. Silas came by the medical station on the evening of day 17. He knocked, which she had noticed he always did, even though it was a common-use station, and knocking was not required. How are you settling in, he said. Not quite a question, the tone of someone asking a practical thing rather than a social nicety. Well, she said, the station is where I want it. I've been through the boundary logs and I have a clear picture of the state of things. And otherwise, she looked at him. He was standing in the doorway with the same posture he had at the territorial line. Easy, unhurried, not taking up more space than he needed. Otherwise is fine too, she said. Devika likes you, he said. That's not a small thing. She doesn't say so, but I know how to read her. I like her too. He nodded. He seemed about to say something else, and then he didn't. The southern gate hinge, she said. I looked at it this afternoon. I can fix it in the morning if you can have someone free to spot. Vikram's free before 10. I'll tell him 8. He nodded again and left. She listened to his footsteps cross the yard. She sat for a moment at her workstation with the log open in front of her. She had been here 17 days. She had fixed 1 pipe fitting, reorganized 1 medical station, reorganized 1 supply shed, rebuilt 1 set of logs, sourced 1 correctly sized connector, and begun to learn 1 territory and the people who lived in it. She thought, This is a good use of 17 days. She thought, I am going to be fine here. Not fine in the way of making something fit that doesn't quite fit. Fine in the original sense of the word. In good order, functioning as it should. Complete. She thought, it is not such a small thing to be complete. 6 weeks later, Nadia fixed the pipe fitting at the northern junction of the eastern water line. 40 minutes. The right wrench. A replacement connector she had sourced from a supplier 2 territories over after she discovered that the pack's standard supply order had been ordering the wrong size for 3 years. Nobody had noticed. She had noticed on day 4. She had ordered the right connector. She had waited for it. She had gone out on a clear morning with the wrench and the connector and her logbook, and she had fixed it. It was a clean repair. She knew it was clean before she finished it. She was making the log entry when she heard Silas coming around the hill on his morning boundary check. He did it every day. Same route, same time. She had learned this in the first week, the way she learned most things, by paying quiet attention. He stopped when he saw her at the pipe, looked at the wrench, the new fitting, the logbook open on the ground by her knee. That's been on my list, he said. I know. I crossed it off. He came and looked at the fitting properly, with the careful attention of someone who knows how work is supposed to look. Clean, he said. Yes. A pause. Then, thank you. I'll cross-reference it with the maintenance calendar. You're overdue on 3 other things I flagged last week. She closed the log and stood and brushed the dirt off her knee. I can walk you through them now, if you have time. I have time. They walked the eastern boundary together, the hill, the wide sky, the fence markings she was still learning. He asked questions. She answered them. He listened the way a person listens when they are actually interested in the answer rather than simply waiting for the next space to speak. She noticed this. She filed it. She was a person who noticed things and filed them. She had always been that person. She had spent 3 years pouring that attention into a place that did not register it, into early mornings that were for someone who had not asked her to be there. She was somewhere different now. The ground was the same ground as anywhere, cold and grass and rock, the particular smell of this specific place that she was learning, that she already looked forward to learning. Her boots made the same sound on it. The difference was small. It was load-bearing. When she stopped and said, "This matters, this needs attention, here is what I see," someone turned and looked. Someone said, "Yes, show me, walk me through it." That was enough. For this season of her life, in her same old boots on new ground with her steady hands and her open logbook, that was everything she needed. She walked the eastern boundary the next morning at 5 in the morning, not for anyone but herself. The light was doing the thing it does in the hour before it commits. The dark thinning, but the color not yet arrived. The world held in that particular stillness that has always felt, to her, like a breath being held before something begins. The air was cold and smelled of hill grass and rock, and the specific quality of this place's morning, which she was learning. She walked slowly. She knew the fence posts now, which ones were solid and which had a little give. She knew the spot where the ground leveled out at the ridge and you could see the valley below, and she stopped there for a moment the way she had been stopping there, most mornings, for 6 weeks now. The valley was gray and quiet. A bird on the ridge called 3 notes and stopped. It called them every morning. She had started listening for it before she could see the ridge, a small landmark of sound she had made hers. She stood there for a minute. Then she kept walking, because the boundary was long and there was work to do, and she was the person who did it, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was the whole of what she had asked for, and it was hers.